Hello again. I appreciated your feedback, Martin, and decided to begin this week with two approaches. The first was define my territory more. The second was to build out more comparisons. I wanted to define my space very literally, so I revisited Google Maps. Seeing an aerial view of the site almost instantly offered up a starting point for me. A few years ago, the company had the parking lot repaved, but they only paved the area they owned. The area is visible without aid, but I went ahead and mapped out the shape. Next, I identified my studio building and my mom's office building, and then defined my individual studio. Looking from the inside this space to the exterior parking lot, only 3 examples of typography existed. These are them: clockwise, a hair salon called Feathered Arrow, a spa called Ti Amo, and a church called Unity of Auburn. This is my first time documenting these signs, and it's also worth noting that all 3 fall outside the area I just defined. The type I have documented previously exists mainly in and around the building. I quickly mapped out these locations, but doing so began to feel arbitrary. I decided to switch gears and try comparing type specimens. Last week I left off here. I compared these signs from 2 separate categories. These signs are both visual reminders of rules or policies that should be followed within the building. The materials used to make the signs and their permanence are different. I decided to try the exercise with 2 signs from the same category. The sign on the left was made in Microsoft Word and is more straightforward and functional in its design. The clip art picture of the illustrated toilet and plunger immediately convey the sign's message, and the text is surprisingly clear in its hierarchy. The use of bold text for the word please emphasizes the importance of the message. On the other hand, the right sign, handwritten with a Sharpie, has a much more personal touch. The hand-drawn script for please tries to add an artistic element to the sign, while the handwritten all caps for the main message make it stand out. The use of a smiley face at the bottom attempts to add a friendly tone. In this third comparison, the image on the left contains a generic caution, slippery when wet sign. The sign uses all caps to emphasize this message, and the white lettering against a black background creates a high contrast to make it stand out. It is located on a ramp outside an exterior door where it is likely to be seen by anyone entering or exiting the building. The sign is secured in place by 5 screws, indicating that it is intended to be a permanent fixture. In contrast, the second sign, made on a computer, is more personalized in its design. The sign used a sans serif font to make it look official, but the fact that it is cut out by hand and taped up to the top of an interior window in a hallway gives it a less threatening look. Its message says that the premises are protected by internet video surveillance. Still, it does not provide any additional information, such as who is doing the surveillance or how to contact them if there is an issue. Looking at all 3 of these comparisons, an element that kept coming up for me was the juxtaposition between temporary and permanent. One of the main differences between a permanent sign and a temporary sign is the length of time they are intended to be displayed. Permanent signs are often designed to last several years and are typically made of durable materials such as metal or plastic, and are usually affixed to a location with screws or bolts. Temporary signs, however, are intended for a shorter period, often a few weeks or months, and are typically made of less durable materials such as paper and held in place with tape. It's curious then that all of this signage, which last week I categorized as taped type because of its ephemerality, has been around for years, defiantly outlasting its material. I began to think of what would happen if you reversed this idea and made a permanent sign out of temporary material. I chose my favorite non-smoking sign, both because it met the criteria of a permanent sign and also because I felt like this sign took it one step further in that the plastic facade was designed to look like wood grain. Type carved into wood seemingly felt superior to cheap plastic. I printed it out and tried to figure out how to cut it. I wanted to feel like the piece had gone through a paper shredder, giving the letterforms the ability to move and flex. I ended up cutting the sign horizontally. I feathered the paper when I was halfway through cutting it just to see what happened. Its message was still somewhat legible as it lay static on the table. So I hung the specimen up by a corner and photographed it spinning around itself. Here, the letters began to misalign, forming patterns and shapes instead of characters. I wondered if this would still be considered a letter form. For example, the letter A in the upper right-hand corner is still somewhat legible, but the I and S before it seem unrecognizable. These questions were about boundaries, more so than the original questions of permanence I sought to explore. But boundaries and permanence are closely intertwined concepts. The boundaries I have been exploring in this space reference the physical limits set for the building and its tenants. Establishing these boundaries creates a sense of stability and predictability in this environment. Conversely, a lack of boundaries can lead to instability, uncertainty, and a sense of impermanence. I returned to my physical specimen and cut off the bottom half. I finished cutting individual strips and began to rearrange them. I took a logical approach to the rearrangement and moved every other strip up one. When I looked at the final piece, it was still mostly readable. But what had I done other than assign a new order and meaning to a sign that already had that? I quickly created a couple of chaotic options to see what they held for me. I tried a 3D approach by essentially curling the paper, and a 2D approach where I again laid the type flat, but this time there was no order. Looking at this image, the misalignment definitely appeals to me. Misalignment is a common theme in my work. The idea of objects fitting together based on likeness of pattern, color, or scale. In the end, the pieces never quite match up, but they are close enough to suggest function. In a final act of curiosity for this week, I applied pieces of the cut printed sign to the original physical sign. I tried to focus on the relationship between the partial letter forms and the whole letter forms, but in the end, I just ended up laughing at myself because, in my quick execution, I simply applied a temporary sign over a permanent one with tape, making it look less official and standardized than the original. So I'll end here this week. Very far from finished, but with an aerial view of the process. I feel like I'm circling something, at least I hope I am, but it's still unclear. As always, any insights or ideas are welcome. Thank you.